Alright, so we are flying. We are flying the Reptile Dragon 2 with the conventional tail. That's pretty much the only change I made, other than some graphical stuff with the OSD, as you can see here. And I'm also running the smaller props. I went back to those 6x4.5 props just because they're a little bit smoother. It's a little bit windy. You can see the airplane's getting knocked around a little bit, bumped around pretty good. I do want to just kind of feel it out a little bit and then run my trims, set up my manual trims and everything, trim it in manual mode rather, and then go and save that in the OSD. And then just kind of fly it around, see how it flies. To turn up my sound a little bit, where I can hear the airplane, hear what it's doing, I can hear the motors. Now, I'm not going to venture out very far because I actually meant to fly this a couple of days ago and one of my motors wasn't running, and just wiggling the signal cable around for that particular motor got everything working again. And I went ahead and pulled all that wiring and everything loose and double checked it. I couldn't find any bad crimps on the connectors or anything weird like that. You know, I couldn't find any real reason for the way it was acting. So I put it all back together and it still works, and I couldn't get the issue to come back. So I'm flying it like that for now. But I will at some point go ahead and pull it out and do a more thorough investigation and possibly go ahead and rewire everything just to be safe. I don't like when little issues come up like that and I can't really find the real obvious cause for it, because there's no guarantee it's not gonna pop back up any minute. So we're not gonna venture out too far. We're gonna stay out over the open fields just in case. So yeah, let me go back to stabilize, which seems to be flying fine. Now I'm gonna go ahead and trim it at about a 5 amp cruise. I'm cruising at about 6 right now. I'm gonna drop my throttle to about, let's do it about 5.5. Let's shoot for 5.5 amps. And I want to trim it there. So I am going to go back to stabilization off. Just stabilization off to manual mode. Quite surprisingly, the airplane is pretty well trimmed already. I didn't need to touch my elevator or yaw trim. Maybe the yaw, it does seem to be swinging the nose a little bit to the right. A few clicks of trim that way. Maybe a couple of clicks of left roll as well. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with that. For not having to touch the trim after changing the whole, basically the back half of the airplane. That sits well with me. So let's go back to stabilize. Heading hold active. I'm going to actually go ahead and gain a little bit of altitude. I'll climb up to about 150 feet or so. And I'm going to go into my menu. Heading hold active. And I'm going to go into stabilizer settings. I'm going to incorporate radio trims, toggle load switch. Heading hold active. So that should have everything retrimmed, and the vector knows where the trims are now. So let's go back to manual. Stabilization off. And the airplane feels great. It's a little bit more responsive than I would like, even though I'm flying on mid rates. I believe, yes, I'm on mid rates. Roll rate's pretty manageable. Feels good. The pitch is a little bit more sensitive than I'd like. Or maybe not. It's pretty good, honestly. So let's go back to stabilize. I noticed my AHI is drifting quite a bit once again. Kind of like it was before when I had some vibration going on. But other than that, it seems fine. And it does settle back down. But that's one reason I did swap back to these props, because they did seem to run a little bit smoother than the APC props that I had on it. Maybe it's just my mounting for my flight controller for the Vector, because I usually don't have issue with vibration, especially on a plane that runs as smooth as this one does. The motors, I don't really feel any vibration when I run them up on the ground, but obviously there is some, or it wouldn't be causing the HI drift like it is. But the main reason I flew this with the Vector, with the conventional tail, I had mentioned I might swap this out to a Maytech flight controller in the near future and put iNav on it, just to see how iNav handles this airplane. But I didn't want to change the tail and the flight controller and everything and find out that it flies totally different and think that it could be one or the other. I'd like to make one change at a time. So I wanted to fly with the Vector still in it, still configured the way it was previously, and see how the conventional tail works. Now I can already say that right off the bat, launching the airplane went like way smoother. It was just a effortless launch, just flew straight out of my hand, didn't dip or climb or anything like it was doing with the V-tail. And that pitch oscillation that I was getting with the V-tail is also non-existent. You can see we're actually getting bumped around pretty good by the wind out here. So I was kind of waiting until late in the day. As you can see, the sun is, well, it's a little higher on the horizon than I thought. I was thinking it was pretty close to setting. It's 7:30 p.m. right now. So I guess we're getting into those long, drawn-out summer afternoons where we have a couple of hours, so we can fly till like 8:30 with no problem, which is fine by me. I will not complain about that at all. But yeah, I probably could have waited the wind out a little bit longer. But we do have a north wind coming from the direction I'm looking right now. I'm flying into the wind, at least I believe I am. I haven't even paid attention to my ground speed, but we'll check that in just a bit. But when the wind is coming from the north, it kind of rolls over that tree line and flood levee that's straight ahead, and it kind of makes a lot of turbulence out here, kind of like a little rotor effect. Even though it's not a very big flood levee, it still seems to have a pretty good rotor effect on the wind coming out across these flat plains out here. So that's kind of where the rough air is coming from. But yeah, we're cruising at about 33, 34 miles an hour flying north. So let me turn and fly south and see how it compares. Yeah, you can see my ground speed is shot right up. We're doing a full, what, 47 miles an hour, 48. And that's at the same throttle setting, haven't touched the throttle. See, 47, 48 going this way. And about 33, 34 going in the opposite direction. So yeah, we definitely do have a north wind. And it's kind of hard to judge the wind direction and speed on the ground when it's blowing this direction, because like I said, where I fly from, my house, which is right at the base of that tree line at the far end of this field where I'm looking directly at it right now, is sheltered by that same tree line and flood levee that causes the rotor effect in the wind. So I fully expect if we go ahead and gain a bit of altitude, I'm going to throttle up and climb. I'm going to climb up to, I don't know, maybe 300, 350 or so. I believe we'll get into some smoother air up here. I just want to kind of feel that out and see how it feels relative to the air down low. And you can see how much calmer the air is already appearing to be up here. So we'll stop at about 350 or so. So we're going to settle down at about 345 to 350, they're about 3 something, I don't know, high 340s. But yeah, you can definitely see the airplane is a little bit calmer, isn't getting bumped around quite as bad up here. So yeah, you can see that bayou directly ahead, kind of right there that I'm pointing at with the center marker in the OSD. There's a flood levee right on the other side of those tall trees. So it kind of, the wind hits it and rolls over that and just starts kind of turbulating all across the fields out here. So I feel like we're probably above that now. So yeah, I guess we're gonna just kind of hold a little bit of altitude and cruise around out here. We're at about 350 or so we should be safe. And I kind of do like having a little bit of altitude in case one of my motors stops. I will be able to have a better chance of gliding the airplane back. Still having to turn my volume up so that I can hear the airplane once my air conditioner kicked on. I just like hearing those motors. In case one does shut out, I'll be able to hear it. I probably would notice it almost immediately anyway. Sure, the airplane will yaw hard one way or the other. But yeah, I like the way this airplane feels with a conventional tail. So, I initially built it with the V-tail. I like the way it looked. I hoped it was going to perform well. It flew okay, but I definitely had some pitch, trim, and oscillation going on with the OSD, and it just didn't feel right. It was hard to get it trimmed. I was playing around with the CG, and that's another thing. The center of gravity with this tail, I did move the CG back forward on the molded marks on the wings, or as Mr. Newton would say, it's balanced on the nipples. So it seems to feel good so far. Of course, I haven't done any glide testing or anything, although we can do that now. I'm going to go ahead and switch back to manual mode.
Stabilization on.
And I'm just going to cut power and see. Yeah, it tends to drop the nose a little bit. And not incredibly fast or violently or anything. If I power back up to my cruise throttle, you see it will pitch the nose back up and level off on its own. And if I pull a lot of power, or as much as I can with these small props rather, it slowly pitches the nose up and starts to gain altitude, although very manageably. So we'll level back off once again at about under 400. I was going to say 350, but we kind of overshot a bit. So let's go ahead and go back to heading hold active at 350, or slightly above. So yeah, the center of gravity feels very good where it's sitting right now. It's slightly forward of neutral, or at least that's the way the airplane flies, as though it's balanced slightly forward of neutral, which is exactly what you want for a little bit of inherent pitch stability. So yeah, I would suggest if you build one of these, Reptile Dragon 2, just kind of skip the V-tail, I think, and go with the conventional tail. I think there's something going on with the incidence in that tail, or something just doesn't feel right. Now you may be able to tune it out and adjust it out and make enough adjustments to get it to work, but the conventional tail works so good, I would just go straight for it. Speaking of the conventional tail, I'm going to disable heading hold.
Stabilize.
So we're just running straight 2D stabilization right now. The airplane doesn't care about heading or altitude. But everything is trimmed well, so it's kind of sitting right at the expected altitude. But I do want to yaw the airplane left. This is full left yaw. And once again, center stick. And now we're going to go full right yaw. It's a little bit slow to react. We're holding full right yaw at the moment, and it's not going. So the yaw. It's still slow to turn, although it is turning eventually. I guess we're kind of turning into that wind. We'll just hold it for a minute and see how it eventually swings the nose around. So yeah, this rudder is still a little bit of an anemic. It's less effective than I would like, but it is more effective than the V-tail. So let's yaw back to the left. Yeah, it's slow yawing back into the wind. So I may be able to up the throws on the rudder, but I was hoping it would be a little bit more effective, have a little bit more authority than it does. But it still feels better than the V-tail did. But yeah, overall it flies better. Still not perfect, but it's definitely better than the V-tail. So let's go back to heading hold.
Heading hold active.
And I want to... let me test return to home.
Return to launch.
Signal lost.
So I like where my cruise throttle is set. It's cruising home at about 5.5 amps, which is ideal. And it is slowly gaining altitude. I believe I have it set to fly home at 300 feet. Maybe it was 250. No, it's still climbing. I think it's gonna shoot for about 300. And you see it's still gaining altitude. It is running the power up a little bit. as it needs to maintain that climb. But yeah, you see it shooting for that 300 there. It's kind of slowly settling down just below it. Now once we get close to home, the airplane is going to descend down to, I want to say it was 200 if I remember right. I do have it set to, once it gets a certain distance from home, it will descend to a lower altitude before it, or while it loiters home. So there's home directly below. I think I had it set to descend down, maybe I didn't. See, it's kind of having trouble center my camera where I can get a better idea of what the airplane is doing. It's kind of having trouble in that wind, loitering its waypoint, holding its position. Although the loiter radius does need to be increased a bit. That's one thing I haven't done. I actually forgot to do that. So it is trying to turn a tight radius around that home waypoint, which is why it's kind of fighting to do so. But it is managing its home position. So let's go ahead and let it finish this orbit. And once we get pointed back south, we'll get it switched back to heading hole. We'll go ahead and do it now.
Signal acquired.
And we'll just kind of fly out this way some more. So yeah, I could probably do a bit more tuning and get it to feel a little bit better than it does at the moment. But I am happy that the conventional tail is an improvement over the V-tail. So I may stick with the Vector and fly it a bit more, or I may pull everything out and rebuild it with a Maytech flight controller. I'm thinking I have the 765 wing that I never put into anything that's sitting on my bench. It needs a home. I may put it in here, which would allow me to get rid of the little power distribution board, which has a built-in BEC 5-volt supply for the servos. They came with the kit. I'm actually using it right now to split the power out to the 2 ESCs and to power my 5-volt rail on the Vector, to power the servos and the receiver. I may actually swap that out and run it on the Maytech board and run iNav. And not that the Vector doesn't work well, because obviously it does, but I just kind of like playing with something different right now. I'm having fun filling out iNav, and I want to try it in a different airframe. That's the only reason I'm considering it, honestly. Got a car down there. Let's follow it for a bit. Although we're probably going to overrun it with the tailwind flying this way. Yeah, we're pulling upwards of 50 miles an hour. And I doubt they're going that fast down the gravel road. Yep. We're kind of overrunning them. So, once again, I don't want to get pushed out over these trees should I lose power right now. So I'm going to kind of venture back toward the north. I mean, if I'm out over these open fields, absolute worst case scenario, I could glide the airplane down if I can't hold enough counter yaw to counter a lost engine and glide the airplane and get it, or limp it home rather, on one motor rather. I could land it out here if I had to. Just do a stabilized landing until I lost video and signal, and just drive out here with the ATV and pick up the airplane. It wouldn't be hard to recover it. So I'm just kind of considering the worst case scenario. Because again, I still don't like trusting that wiring that had an issue that miraculously fixed itself, and I was not able to find it. So yeah, as far as the changes I made on the Vector with the visual stuff, I just changed the color of all the main numeric readouts. I changed those from yellow to white, and I changed the graphical items. I changed those to green with a blue shadow or background. I forget what they call it. I'm actually look at that. Let me point the airplane back this way so we're not getting pushed too far downwind while I do that. Let's pull the heading over here.
Heading hold active.
We can take a look in the, actually I'm still in this menu. I need to go back to OSD setup, to color setup. Yeah, the graphical objects are now green with a blue highlight. Numerics are white with a black highlight. And my title, messages, and text color is yellow with a black highlight. I'm actually considering changing that blue highlight. Let me change that to, I want to go back to a standard black highlight. I think that looks a little bit better. See what that looks like.
Active.
Yeah, that kind of looks a little bit better to me. Makes it a little bit easier to see the AHI and some of the stuff like around my left and right vertical bars there that show my speed and altitude, as well as around the battery, the motor battery indicator below the milliamp hour counter. It just looks a little bit better, a little more contrasty. And I've also changed my AHI from the F16 layout, is what I think the full one with the little scaling and everything on it that shows your different degrees in pitch. I changed it from that one to just the standard AHI, which you see there, which is a little bit less intrusive on your FPV view. And I can also toggle the OSD off, like so. If I just toggle the mode switch, it'll completely turn the OSD off. Give you a clean, uninterrupted view, other than the recording indicator from the Runcam 4K hybrid. You toggle it once again and they'll switch it right back on. I'd like flying with my OSD though. I mean, we are getting an HD recording of all this too, if there's anything interesting that I would like to use later. In any kind of edit or whatever, we'll have the 4K. Or actually, I'm recording in 2.7K 60 FPS. We'll have that footage though. I'm noticing my RSSI reading is been somewhat low. I'm using the 900 MHz Dragon Link, which its RSSI scaling is still not super good. I'm still running an older firmware. There is the next gen firmware that the last I looked was probably about 2 months ago. It was still in beta and it wasn't really, you know, it was getting updates, you know, at least once, sometimes twice a week, I think, from what I saw. So I just kind of held off on updating my Dragon Link gear to the newer firmware until it releases a standard version, a stable version that I can stick with for a little while. So I'll probably do that. I'll update it once that happens. But for now, I'm using one of the old first firmwares that came out right when they added the 900 megahertz hardware. And that's a known problem with the RSSI. It's not very linear versus distance. And I'm also using the RSSI in the SBUS stream to the vector, which again is a little bit more prone to that erratic RSSI than the analog from what I saw. So I had the same issue with the AR Pro when I was running ArduPilot in it. And I set up the analog RSSI on that one, and I had a little bit better performance, a little bit more intuitive readout for the RSSI than I did using the RSSI in the serial stream. And again, that was known to be the case. And it's something that should be fixed with a new firmware, but I just haven't updated to it yet. I actually want to cruise out here and look at some of the that cleared area that they've been working on recently that we looked at in, I think, the previous flight, either the previous one or the one before that, the video that I uploaded with the E-Sky Eagle. One of those two videos, I flew out here and talked a bit about it. I just kind of wanted to see what kind of progress they made out here, for no other reason than to satisfy my curiosity. Notice once we got downwind of this little patch of trees. I hit a little bit more turbulent air. I still believe that has some effect on how rough the air is, whether or not it's coming over those woods or not. It just, I never get smooth air when the wind's blowing from the north out in this area, which kind of limits my flying days, especially in the winters. The wind almost always comes out of the north in the winter. But in the summer, when we get the south winds, it's perfectly smooth out here for some reason. Or east or west winds is always flyable as well, as long as it's not blowing too fast. But yeah, I'd already got a pretty good look out here. When I flew the Eagle over this area. But now I'm getting another good look at it, and I'm getting an HD recording, so I'll be able to see a little bit more detail on the ground. So yeah, I'm definitely glad I flew the conventional tail before pulling the vector out of this airplane, because if I would have swapped out the tail and threw in a different flight controller with iNav, I would have probably assumed that iNav just did a lot better job of handling the pitch inconsistencies that I was having with the airplane. So I'm really glad that I flew it like this, so that I know what the actual cause and fix was. But I expect iNav will fly this airplane quite well anyway. Now I noticed my video is dropping out quite a bit over here, and that's because when I fly this direction there's some obstacles between my airplane and my video transmitter, and probably a little bit of multipathing off of the neighbor's house as well. But I do want to fly out this way just to see what kind of equipment they have sitting here, because I'm curious. I can see it from the house, but I can't really tell what it is. So I want to see what's going on here, and we'll get a good HD recording of that, which we'll be able to look back later and see. And I believe that's all they had out here. So we're going to go back south, let the wind push us over here, and we'll quickly get back into a good area for video reception. Or, I mean, I guess we could just fly through it. It's not that bad. And we'll maybe go ahead and set up a landing from this direction.
Stabilize.
Go to standard stabilize mode and start reducing power and gliding home. Go ahead and end the flight. We've been flying for about 30 minutes now. We've used 3,400 milliamp hours out of a 4S5200. We're still at 14.7 volts, which is perfectly adequate. We have a little bit of reserve left. A nice little sunset starting over there. Kind of wish I'd waited a little bit later to fly. I might have got a little bit more calm air and a better sunset to look at, better view. But I'm quite happy with the way this is working out. So we're going to overfly the neighbor's house here. Go ahead and start pushing the nose down, cutting power so we don't build up too much airspeed, and start my descent. I'm gonna power back up just so I can carry some power through, clear the cornfield like so. Now I'll start my descent, my glide, start my flare, and nice smooth landing. So that's gonna be the end of the flight.
Stabilization.
Any questions, comments, drop them below the video. I'm not sure if I'll upload this one before I do the one that I promised, showing how to set up the things in iNav with the OSD arrow always pointing home, as well as my little deadband her for the sliders for pan and tilt, which I'm also using on this airplane, by the way. I will have that out soon. I don't know, we'll figure out where we're going next. Kind of getting bored, looking for something, change of pace. That's why I'm thinking about sticking on Av in here and continuing playing with some of the features of that. So, yeah, thank you for watching this video. Keep an eye out for the next ones to come. And of course, as always, thank you to my Patreon pledges and channel members. You all make it happen. So, appreciate that. See you in the next videos.